The dirt under Josephine Shepherd's boots had turned from Tennessee clay to Oklahoma dust, and now standing in the merciless afternoon sun of West Cliff Curves, Colorado, she understood that her father had brought her west not for opportunity, but for sale. She watched him shake hands with a broad-shouldered rancher whose silver hair caught the light like wire, coins exchanging between weathered palms while she stood there like livestock at auction, her single carpetbag clutched so tight her knuckles had gone white. "This here is Josephine, her father said, his voice carrying that false cheerfulness she had learned to distrust over the past 3 months of travel. "She is 18 years old, healthy, can cook and clean and sew. She will make a fine wife for your son." The rancher, who had introduced himself as Samuel Garrett, looked her over with calculating eyes that made her skin crawl. "My boy Theodore is particular, but she looks sturdy enough. The agreement stands. You get your stake, enough to start fresh in California. I get a bride for my son. Theodore needs a wife who can handle ranch life." Josephine felt the words like a slap. Her father had gambled away their farm back in Tennessee, drank away her mother's inheritance. And when creditors came calling, he had promised her a new life out west. She had believed him because what choice did an unmarried girl have? She had trusted him during the long wagon journey, through dust storms and river crossings, even when he grew secretive, even when he started talking about arrangements and opportunities. Now she knew. He had sold her, bartered her future for enough gold to restart his miserable life somewhere else, leaving her with strangers in a town she had never heard of until yesterday. "Pa," she said, her voice shaking despite her efforts to control it. "What are you doing?" He would not meet her eyes. "It is for the best, Josie. Mr. Garrett is a respectable man. His son will provide for you. You will have a home, security. That is more than I can give you now." "You are selling me." The words came out flat, stating fact rather than asking for denial. "I am securing your future." But still he would not look at her. Samuel Garrett cleared his throat. "My ranch is 3 miles north of town. Theodore is there now with the hands, moving cattle to the upper pasture. We will head out directly. Say your goodbyes." Her father finally met her gaze, and what she saw there made her stomach turn. Shame, yes, but also relief. Relief to be rid of the burden she represented. "You will be fine, Josie. Better than fine. The Garretts are wealthy. You will want for nothing. Except a father who did not trade me like a horse." She said it quietly, but she saw him flinch. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. If she let him touch her, if she let herself feel anything but the cold anger currently holding her together, she would shatter right here in the street. "Goodbye, Pa." He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked toward the saloon without another word. Josephine watched him go, memorizing the slope of his shoulders, the way he favored his right leg, all the familiar details of a man she had loved, who had just betrayed her more thoroughly than she thought possible. "Come along, girl," Samuel Garrett said. Not unkindly, but not gently either. "My wagon is at the livery. The sooner we get to the ranch, the sooner you can settle in and meet Theodore." She followed because there was nothing else to do. West Cliff was not a large town, just a main street with shops and businesses, houses spreading out from the center, and beyond that, the vast expanse of the wet mountain valley with the Sangre de Cristo range rising like teeth against the western sky. The year was 1878, and the town was still raw and new, founded only a few years earlier when settlers came looking for silver and stayed for the ranching. The wagon ride passed in silence. Samuel Garrett did not seem inclined to conversation, and Josephine had nothing to say. She studied the landscape instead. The way the grass stretched golden and wild, the dark clusters of pine on the hillsides, the impossibly blue sky that seemed to go on forever. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Like everything else in her life lately, the Garrett Ranch materialized gradually, first as fence lines, then as grazing cattle, then finally as a collection of buildings clustered around a large two-story house painted white with green shutters. Barns, corrals, bunkhouses for the ranch hands, a chicken coop, and various other structures spoke of prosperity and permanence. Samuel Garrett had not exaggerated his wealth. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was thin and sharp-featured, with graying brown hair pulled back in a severe bun. "This is my wife, Margaret," Samuel said. "Margaret, this is Josephine Shepherd, the bride I arranged for Theodore." Margaret looked Josephine up and down with the same calculating assessment her husband had used. "She is pretty enough. Can you work, girl?" "Yes, madam." "Cook?" "Yes, madam." "Good. Theodore needs a practical wife, not some delicate flower. He'll be back by supper. Samuel, help her with her bag. She can have the spare room until the wedding." "When is the wedding?" Josephine heard herself ask. "Sunday next," Margaret said briskly. "That gives us a week to prepare. Not that it will be fancy. We will have the ceremony here, just family and a few neighbors. The parson from town will officiate." A week! 7 days before she would be permanently bound to a man she had never met, whose father had purchased her like property. The reality of it settled over her like a shroud. The spare room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook on the wall for hanging clothes. Josephine set her carpet bag on the bed and sat down beside it, staring at the whitewashed walls. This was her life now. This room. This ranch. These cold strangers, and whatever Theodore Garrett turned out to be. She did not cry. She had learned over the past months that crying did not help, did not change anything, only left her with swollen eyes and a headache. Instead, she unpacked her few belongings, hung her 2 dresses on the hook, arranged her mother's silver hairbrush on the washstand, and tried not to think about all the futures she would never have now. Supper was an awkward affair. Margaret served beef stew and biscuits at a long table in the dining room, while Samuel sat at the head and talked about cattle prices and water rights. Josephine ate mechanically, tasting nothing, waiting for Theodore to appear. But the meal ended, and he still had not arrived. "The herd must have given them trouble," Samuel said, pushing back from the table. "He will be along." Josephine helped Margaret clean up, grateful for something to do with her hands. The older woman was not talkative, but occasionally offered terse instructions about where things went, how she preferred the dishes stacked, what time breakfast was served. Information delivered without warmth, but also without overt hostility. "Theodore is a good man," Margaret said suddenly, scrubbing a pot with fierce concentration. "He works hard. He does not drink or gamble. He will provide for you." "Does he know about the arrangement?" Josephine asked. "Did he want a wife?" Margaret's mouth tightened. "He knows his duty. A man his age should be married. We decided it was time." So Theodore had not wanted this either. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. At least she would not be the only unwilling party in this transaction. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night, when she heard hoofbeats and men's voices outside. Boots on the porch, the front door opening and closing, a low conversation she could not quite make out. Then footsteps in the hallway pausing outside her door. A knock, soft but definite. "Miss Shepherd, may I speak with you?" The voice was younger than she had expected, and there was something in it that did not match the coldness she had experienced from his parents. She got up, pulled her shawl around her shoulders over her nightgown, and opened the door. The man standing in the hallway was not what she had been bracing herself for. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that were a startling green even in the dim lamplight. He was handsome in a rough, sun-weathered way, with broad shoulders and work-hardened hands he was currently twisting together nervously. "I am Theodore Garrett," he said. "I just got back and my father told me about you, about the arrangement." He said the word with distaste. I wanted to apologize. I did not know he was going to do this. If I had known, I would have stopped it. Josephine studied him, trying to gauge sincerity. "But you did not know, and here I am. Your father paid for me. Do I not have to marry you?" Something flashed across his face. Anger, maybe, or shame. "You are not property. What my father did is wrong. I will not hold you to it." "Then what happens to me?" She did not mean to sound so harsh, but the words came out bitter. "I have no money, no family here, nowhere to go. At least as your wife I would have a roof and food." Theodore flinched. "I am not explaining this well. I just meant that I will not force you into anything. If you want to leave, I will help you. If you want to stay but not marry me, we will figure something out. And if you do want to go through with the wedding, I promise I will treat you with respect. I will give you time. We do not have to rush anything." It was such a vastly different speech from anything she had expected that Josephine felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Not hope exactly, but maybe the possibility of hope. "I do not have anywhere else to go," she said quietly. "My father is probably already on his way to California. I have no other family. I have maybe $3 to my name. So unless you are offering to send me back east, I think getting married is my only real option." Theodore's jaw tightened. What kind of father sells his daughter? The desperate kind. She said it without emotion. Or maybe just the selfish kind. I do not know anymore. They stood there in the hallway, two people, trapped by circumstances neither had chosen, and Josephine felt an unexpected kinship with this man whose name she had not known this morning. "I will be honest with you," Theodore said finally. "I do not want a wife right now. I have been saving money, planning to buy my own land south of here, start my own ranch away from my father's shadow. But he has been pushing marriage, saying it is time I settled down. I have been resisting. Then tonight I come home and find out he bought me a bride like I am some kind of prince in a story." The bitterness in his voice was clear. "So we are both trapped," Josephine said. "Maybe." Theodore met her eyes. "Or maybe we can make the best of it. I am not saying I will love you. I do not know you. But I can promise I will be fair. I will not hurt you. And maybe over time we can at least become friends." It was not a romance. It was barely even a courtship. But it was more honesty than her own father had given her in months, and Josephine found herself grateful for that much. "All right," she said. "We will marry on Sunday, and we will figure out the rest as we go." Theodore nodded, something like relief crossing his face. "Thank you. For understanding. For not hating me for what my father did." "I do not hate you. I do not know you well enough to hate you," she managed a small, tired smile. "Ask me again in a month." That startled a laugh out of him, brief but genuine. "Fair enough. Good night, Miss Shepherd." "Good night, Theodore." He turned to go, then paused. "One more thing. If you need anything this week, anything at all, please tell me, not my parents, me, all right?" She nodded and he left, his boots echoing down the hallway. Josephine closed the door and leaned against it, her mind spinning. Theodore Garrett was not a monster, that was something. More than she had dared hope for when she watched her father walk away this afternoon. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Margaret put her to work immediately, testing her skills in the kitchen, the laundry, the garden. Josephine worked without complaint, proving herself competent, if not expert. She saw Theodore only at mealtimes, where they exchanged polite conversation under his parents' watchful eyes. He asked her about Tennessee. She asked him about ranching. They circled each other carefully, strangers preparing to bind their lives together. On Thursday, Margaret took her into town to buy fabric for a dress. Not white, that would be impractical, but a nice blue calico that brought out Josephine's eyes. They stopped at the general store where Margaret introduced her to various townspeople as Theodore's intended. The women looked at her with curiosity and varying degrees of sympathy. Josephine suspected her story was not unique out here in the territories where women were scarce and arrangements were common. At the dress shop, while Margaret was examining lace, another woman approached Josephine. She was perhaps 30, dressed practically in split riding skirts and a worn jacket. "I heard about you," the woman said, without preamble. "I am Catherine Mills. I run the boarding house on 3rd Street. If you ever need help, a place to go, you come find me, all right?" Josephine blinked at her. "Why would I need that?" Catherine's expression was hard to read. Theodore is a good man, better than his father, but sometimes marriages arranged like this go bad. I just want you to know you have options. Women need to look out for each other in places like this." Before Josephine could respond, Margaret called her over to approve the lace selection. Catherine squeezed her hand once, then disappeared. But the encounter stayed with Josephine. It was strangely comforting to know that someone in this town thought beyond transactions and property. Sunday arrived with clear skies and unseasonable warmth for late September. Josephine put on her new blue dress, fixed her hair the way her mother had taught her, and tried not to think about the fact that this was her wedding day, and she felt nothing but numb resignation. The ceremony was held in the Garrett's front parlor with about 20 people in attendance. The parson was a thin, earnest young man who looked uncomfortable with the entire proceeding. Theodore stood beside her in his Sunday best, his face carefully blank. They recited the vows, exchanged simple gold bands, and just like that, Josephine Shepherd became Josephine Garrett. There was cake afterward and coffee and neighbors offering congratulations that felt awkward and forced. Josephine smiled and thanked them and tried not to notice the pitying looks some of the women gave her. Theodore stayed close but did not touch her more than was required for propriety. When the last guest had left and evening was falling, Samuel clapped Theodore on the shoulder. "Time to take your bride upstairs, son. Make this marriage official." Josephine felt her stomach drop. She had been trying not to think about this part, about what would be expected of her tonight. Theodore's jaw tightened. "That is our business, Father. It is your duty. A marriage is not legal until it is consummated." "I said it is our business." Theodore's voice had gone cold. "Josephine and I will manage our marriage without your interference." Father and son stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Finally, Samuel looked away first. "Fine, but do not think I do not know what you are planning, Theodore. You are thinking of leaving, taking your money, and starting elsewhere. Well, now you have a wife to think about. Responsibilities. You cannot just run off whenever things do not suit you." "I am aware of my responsibilities," Theodore said quietly. "Come on, Josephine. We should turn in." She followed him upstairs, her heart pounding. But when they reached the bedroom, the one that had been Theodore's since childhood and was now apparently theirs, he stopped. "You can have the bed," he said. "I will take the floor. I meant what I said about not forcing anything. Your father said the marriage is not legal unless my father can go to hell." The vehemence in Theodore's voice startled her. "I will not touch you unless you want me to. I do not care what the law says. You did not have a choice in this marriage. At least you can have a choice in this." Josephine looked at him, this man who was now her husband, and felt something shift. Not love, not yet, but maybe the beginning of respect. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, already pulling blankets from the chest at the foot of the bed to make his pallet on the floor. "Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow we go back to regular work. My father will expect you to help my mother, and I will be out with the cattle. But in the evenings we can talk. Get to know each other properly, if that is all right with you." "That is all right with me." And so began their strange marriage. By day, Josephine worked alongside Margaret, learning the rhythms of the ranch, proving herself useful. By night, she and Theodore sat on the porch or in their room and talked. Carefully at first, then with growing ease. He told her about growing up here, about his dreams of having his own place, about the ways his father's expectations had always felt like chains. She told him about her mother's death 2 years earlier, about watching her father spiral into gambling and drink, about the slow horror of realizing he was bringing her west not to help her, but to get rid of her. Weeks passed. The aspen on the mountainsides turned gold, and the cattle were brought down from the high pastures for the winter. Theodore taught Josephine to ride, patiently correcting her seat and her grip on the reins while she learned to trust the horse beneath her. They worked together sometimes, mending fence or moving hay, falling into comfortable partnership. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains red and gold, Theodore said, "I have almost enough money saved, maybe by spring. I have been looking at land south of here, near Texas Creek. Good water, good grass. I could start small, build it up. Josephine looked at him. Does your plan include a wife? He turned to meet her eyes. That depends. Would you want to come? It was the first time he had asked her what she wanted, really asked since that night in the hallway. Josephine thought about the question seriously. She thought about the life she had here, working under Margaret's critical eye, living in Samuel's house, forever the purchased bride. Then she thought about starting fresh, building something new with Theodore, having a chance to prove herself as more than a transaction. Yes, she said, I would want to come. Something changed in Theodore's expression. Warmth, maybe, or relief. I am glad. I have been hoping you would say that. I did not want to assume. You have been good to me, Josephine said. Better than you had to be. I know this is not the life you wanted, but if we are going to be stuck with each other, I would rather be stuck somewhere we chose together. Theodore laughed at that, a real laugh that crinkled his eyes. When you put it that way, it sounds almost romantic. Do not push your luck, she said, but she was smiling too. Things shifted after that conversation, not dramatically, but noticeably. Theodore started sitting closer to her in the evenings. Their hands would brush when passing tools or dishes, and neither would pull away quite so quickly. Once, helping her down from a horse, his hands lingered on her waist, and their eyes met and held for a long moment before they both looked away, flustered. Josephine found herself watching him during the day, noticing the way he moved, the way he treated the animals with patience and the hired hands with respect. He had a quiet strength that was different from his father's domineering presence. Theodore never yelled or threw his weight around. He simply did what needed to be done, and people followed his lead because they wanted to, not because they feared him. November brought the first snow, light dustings that melted by afternoon but promised heavier storms to come. The ranch work shifted to winter tasks, making repairs, checking food stores, preparing for the months when travel would be difficult, and they would be largely cut off from town. It was during one of these snowy afternoons when Josephine was in the kitchen making bread and Theodore came in stamping snow from his boots that things changed again. He crossed to the stove to warm his hands, standing close enough that she could feel the cold radiating off his coat. It is really coming down out there, he said. We will be snowed in by nightfall. Your mother will not be happy. She wanted to go to town tomorrow. My mother is never happy. Theodore said it matter-of-factly, without heat. Then, Josephine, can I ask you something? She looked up from the dough she was kneading, flour dusting her hands and forearms. Of course. Are you unhappy here, with me? The question surprised her. Why would you think that? Because I trapped you in this marriage, because I'm not giving you the life you probably dreamed of as a girl, because we are stuck in my parents' house instead of having our own place. He was not looking at her, staring instead at his hands. I would understand if you regret agreeing to this. Josephine wiped her hands on her apron and stepped closer to him. Theodore, look at me. He did, and she saw genuine worry in his green eyes. I am not unhappy, she said carefully. I am not where I thought I would be a year ago, but my father is the one who trapped me, not you. You have been nothing but kind. You have given me choices when you did not have to, and yes, I am looking forward to leaving here and starting our own place, but not because I am miserable with you. I am looking forward to it because I think we might actually build something good together. You really think so? His voice was soft, almost hopeful. I do. And saying it, Josephine realized she meant it. Somewhere between that first awkward conversation in the hallway and now, she had stopped thinking of Theodore as her captor and started thinking of him as her partner, maybe even as a friend. Theodore reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were cold from the outdoors, but his touch was gentle. I am glad you are here, Josephine. I did not think I would be, but I am. Her breath caught. They were standing so close she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could feel the warmth of him despite the cold he had brought in from outside. Her heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "I am glad too," she whispered. He leaned in slowly, carefully, still giving her the chance to refuse. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and questioning, a first kiss that was really asking permission. Josephine kissed him back, her flour-dusted hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart hammering as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Theodore rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted, "but I did not want to presume." "You can presume a little," Josephine said, surprising herself with her boldness. "We are married, after all." That night, when they went upstairs, Theodore did not make his pallet on the floor. Instead, they lay beside each other in the narrow bed, talking in whispers long into the night. And when Josephine woke in the morning, it was to find herself curled against Theodore's chest, his arms around her, and she felt safer than she had since her mother died. Winter deepened, and with it, their connection. They still slept in the same bed, though it was several more weeks before their relationship became truly intimate. When it did, it was natural and right. Two people who had learned to trust each other finally expressing it physically. Josephine discovered that Theodore was as patient and considerate in bed as he was everywhere else, always making sure she was comfortable, always putting her pleasure before his own. For the first time since arriving in Colorado, Josephine felt like she had a future worth anticipating. But not everything was smooth. Samuel grew increasingly irritated with Theodore's independent plans, frequently making comments about ungrateful sons and foolish dreams. Margaret seemed to resent Josephine's growing competence, finding fault with even her best efforts. The tension in the house built like pressure in a kettle. It came to a head in February during a particularly bitter cold snap. Theodore had gone into town for supplies despite the weather and returned with news that made his father explode. "You put money down on that land?" Samuel's voice shook with fury. "Without consulting me?" "I do not need to consult you. It is my money earned by my own work." Theodore's voice was calm, but his jaw was set. "I told you months ago I was planning to start my own ranch." "And I told you that plan was foolish. You have everything you need here. This ranch will be yours someday. Why throw away money on raw land when you already have a guaranteed inheritance?" "Because I want something that is mine, not something handed down with strings attached." Theodore glanced at Josephine, who was standing frozen in the kitchen doorway. "We want something that is ours." Samuel's gaze swung to her, hostile and cold. "This is your doing." Filling his head with ideas of leaving, "I should have known better than to bring in some drifter's daughter." Josephine felt the words like a slap, but before she could respond, Theodore stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "Do not speak to my wife that way, ever." "Your wife," Samuel said scornfully. "The girl I bought for you. Do not forget I paid good money for that marriage. And do not you forget that I did not ask you to." Theodore's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "I did not want your arrangement, but Josephine is my wife now, and I love her, and you will treat her with respect, or we will leave this house tonight. Weather be damned." The silence that followed was deafening. Josephine's heart was racing, not from fear, but from what Theodore had just said so casually, like it was simple fact. "I love her." Samuel stared at his son, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he turned and stalked out of the room without another word. Margaret followed him, throwing a venomous look at Josephine as she went. When they were alone, Josephine found her voice. "Did you mean that?" Theodore looked at her, his expression softening. "That I will not let them disrespect you? Absolutely." "No, the other part. That you love me." He crossed the room to her, taking her hands in his. "Yes, I meant that. I know this marriage started as a business arrangement, and I know we promised to just be friends, but somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, Josephine. If that is not what you want to hear, I'm sorry, but it is the truth." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time. Happy tears. "You are an idiot," she said, but she was smiling. "I have been in love with you since Christmas, at least. I just did not think you felt the same way." Theodore's face broke into a grin. "Really?" "Really." She laughed through her tears. "So yes, let us leave this house. Let us go start our own ranch and our own life. The sooner the better." He kissed her then, deep and hungry, and Josephine kissed him back with all the pent-up emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theodore pressed his forehead to hers. "It will be hard," he warned, "starting from scratch, living in a cabin while we build, working from dawn to past dark. It will not be easy." "Nothing in my life has been easy," Josephine said, "but at least this will be ours. At least we will be choosing it together." They left the Garrett ranch in early March, as soon as the roads cleared enough for travel. Samuel refused to speak to them, though Margaret gave Josephine some kitchen supplies with a grudging, "Oh, you will need these." It was not forgiveness, but it was something. The land Theodore had purchased was beautiful in a stark, wild way. It sat in a valley near Texas Creek, with the Arkansas River running through the southern portion and mountains rising on both sides. There was a small existing cabin, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was theirs. They spent the first weeks just making the cabin livable. Theodore repaired the roof and chimney, while Josephine scrubbed years of accumulated dirt and made curtains from the fabric Margaret had given them. They had brought 2 horses, some chickens, and enough supplies to get through until they could plant a garden and acquire cattle. It was hard work, exhausting work. Some nights, they collapsed into bed too tired to do anything but sleep, but it was different from working on the Garrett ranch. Every improvement they made was building something of their own. Every piece of fence they erected was marking out their future, and they were happy. Josephine caught Theodore singing sometimes while he worked, old cowboy ballads she had never heard before. She found herself humming while she tended the garden, feeling lighter than she had in years. They made love in the afternoon when the work was done early, laughing and slow and tender. They sat on the porch in the evenings and made plans, dreaming out loud about the ranch they would build, the cattle they would raise, the life they would create. In May, a man rode up to their cabin. He was tall and lean, probably in his early 30s, with dust covering his clothes and a wary look in his blue eyes. "Afternoon," he called out, staying on his horse. "I'm Isaac Parker. I'm working a claim about 5 miles west of here. Saw your smoke and wanted to introduce myself. Neighbors are scarce out here. Figured we should know each other." Theodore came out of the barn, hand extended. "Theodore Garrett, this is my wife, Josephine. Good to meet you, Parker. You're right about neighbors being scarce. We have been here 2 months, and you are the first person we have seen besides the supply run to town." Isaac swung down from his horse, shaking Theodore's hand. "Working a claim alone gets lonely? Mind if I water my horse? Then maybe your wife would not mind if I joined you for supper. I have been eating my own cooking for 3 weeks, and I am about sick of it." Josephine laughed. "You are welcome to stay. I cannot promise it will be fancy, but it is better than beans out of a can." Isaac stayed for supper, and then for conversation on the porch afterward. He was easy company, with stories about prospecting and drifting that made both Theodore and Josephine laugh. He was respectful and friendly, and when he left, he made them promise to ride out to his claim sometime soon. "Nice to have neighbors," Theodore said that night as they got ready for bed, "even if they are 5 miles away." "He seemed kind," Josephine agreed. "Did you notice he called me Madam the entire time? Very proper." "Probably because you are a proper married woman now," Theodore teased, pulling her close. "My proper wife!" She swatted at him playfully. "I was not particularly proper earlier when He kissed her before she could finish the sentence, and they forgot about Isaac Parker and everything else for a while. Summer arrived with heat and the hard work of establishing a ranch. Theodore made a trip to Westcliff and came back with a small herd of cattle, 10 head to start. They were scraggly and half wild, but they were a beginning. Josephine learned to help with the branding, the herding, all the tasks that went into running even a small operation. Isaac became a regular visitor, stopping by once a week or so to share news or help with heavy work that needed extra hands. He was good company, always respectful, and both Theodore and Josephine came to think of him as a friend. In August, Josephine realized her monthly courses had not come in some time. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, afraid to jinx it. But when another week passed and she started feeling queasy in the mornings, she could not deny it anymore. She told Theodore one evening when they were sitting by the creek, watching the water flow past in the fading light. "I think I'm with child," she said quietly. Theodore went very still beside her. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. All the signs are there." A slow smile spread across his face, wonder and joy mixing together. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," she confirmed. And then she was laughing and crying at the same time, and Theodore was holding her, his own eyes suspiciously bright. That night, lying in bed with Theodore's hand resting protectively on her still flat belly, Josephine thought about the journey that had brought her here, her father selling her like property, the cold transaction that had made her Theodore's wife, the slow transformation from strangers to friends to lovers, and now this, a child conceived in love and wanted with their whole hearts. "I forgive him," she said suddenly. Theodore knew immediately who she meant. "Your father?" "Yes. If he had not brought me west, if he had not sold me to your father, I would never have found you. I would never have this life. So I forgive him." Theodore pressed a kiss to her temple. "You are a better person than I am. I am still angry at my father for treating you like property. But good came from it anyway. That is what matters." She turned to face him in the darkness. "I love you, Theodore Garrett. I love our life. I love our home. And I love that we are starting a family together." "I love you too," he murmured against her lips, "so much. More than I knew it was possible to love someone." They made love that night with extra tenderness, mindful of the tiny life growing between them, celebrating the future they were building together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall. Josephine continued working as long as she could, only stopping the heaviest tasks when Theodore insisted, worried about her overdoing it. Isaac continued his visits, bringing news that gold had been found in the area and more prospectors were arriving daily. The isolation that had characterized their first months was slowly breaking down as more people moved into the region. In late October, Theodore took Josephine back to Westcliff to see the doctor. It was her first time back in town since the wedding over a year earlier. The place looked the same, but felt different, or maybe she was the one who was different. She was no longer the frightened, betrayed girl who had watched her father walk away. She was a ranch wife, partner to a good man, carrying his child. The doctor confirmed what she already knew and said the baby would likely arrive in early March. "You are healthy and strong," he told her. "Just take care not to overdo it. At your stage, a woman should avoid heavy lifting and long hours on her feet." On the way out of town, they stopped at Catherine Mills's boarding house. Josephine had thought about the woman several times over the past year, wondering about her kind offer of help. She wanted Catherine to know that help had not been needed, that things had worked out better than anyone could have expected. Catherine answered the door and broke into a genuine smile when she saw Josephine. "Mrs. Garrett, I heard you had left the ranch. Come in, come in." Over tea and cookies, Josephine told her story. Not all of it, but enough. The arranged marriage, Theodore's unexpected kindness, their decision to start fresh, the baby coming in spring. Catherine listened with interest and clear approval. "I am glad," she said finally. "When I saw you last year, you looked so lost. Now you look happy, settled. That is how it should be." "Thank you for offering help," Josephine said. "Even though I did not need it, it meant something to know someone cared." "Women have to look out for each other," Catherine said firmly. "Especially out here where we are still finding our way. If you ever do need anything, my offer stands." They left with Catherine's promise to visit the ranch in the spring to meet the baby. Riding home, Theodore said, "You have a knack for making friends." "So do you. Isaac stops by at least once a week." That is because you are a good cook, and he is tired of his own beans, Theodore teased, but he sobered quickly. I am glad you have Catherine, though. When the baby comes, it will be good to have another woman around, someone with experience. Winter arrived early and hard that year. Snow piled up and temperatures dropped well below freezing. Theodore and Josephine spent most of their time inside by the fire, working on small tasks that could be done indoors. He carved a cradle from pine wood while she sewed tiny gowns and blankets. They talked about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about how to expand the ranch once the baby was old enough. My father was hard, Theodore said one evening, running sandpaper over the cradle he was making, demanding. Nothing was ever good enough for him. I do not want to be that way with our children. You will not be, Josephine said with certainty. You are nothing like Samuel. I hope not. He looked up from his work. I want our children to feel safe, loved, not like they have to earn approval. They will, she promised. We will make sure of it. Christmas was quiet, but happy. They roasted a chicken and Josephine made pie from the dried apples they had stored. Isaac managed to fight through the snow to join them, bringing a bottle of whiskey and hand-carved wooden toys he had made in his claim during the long, dark nights. For the baby, he said almost shyly, I figured I should practice being Uncle Isaac. Uncle Isaac, Josephine repeated, touched. I like that. Will you stand as godfather? Isaac looked genuinely moved. I would be honored. They saw in the new year of 1879 with quiet gratitude for the life they had built. The baby was due in a couple of months. The ranch was surviving its first winter. They had friends in each other and the promise of spring to come. In early February, a letter arrived from Margaret Garrett. It was the first communication they had received from Theodore's family since leaving. Theodore read it aloud to Josephine. Theodore, your father has had a stroke. The doctor says he will live, but he is greatly diminished. He cannot speak clearly and his right side is weak. I am writing to tell you because you should know, not because I expect you to come. You made your choice. But he is still your father. Margaret. Theodore set the letter down, his expression unreadable. I should go see him. Do you want to? I do not know. He was a hard man. He treated you terribly. But he is still my father, like she said. Josephine moved awkwardly with her large belly to sit beside him. Then we will go. When the weather clears a bit, we will go together. They made the trip to the Garrett Ranch in late February. Samuel was indeed greatly changed. He sat in a chair by the window, one side of his face drooping, his speech slurred but comprehensible. When Theodore and Josephine entered, his eyes filled with tears. Son, he managed. Sorry for everything. Theodore stood stiffly for a moment, then crossed to kneel beside his father's chair. I know, Pa, I know. They stayed for 2 days. Samuel could not say much, but he reached for Josephine's hand at one point and squeezed it, and she understood it was his apology to her as well. Margaret was softer than before, worn down by the stress of caring for her invalid husband. She admired Josephine's pregnant belly and actually smiled when Theodore talked about the ranch. You were right to leave, Margaret said quietly as they prepared to go. You are happy. That is what matters. Riding home, Theodore was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, I am glad we went. I am glad he apologized, but I'm also glad we are not living there anymore. Me too, Josephine agreed. We have our own life now, but it is good to make peace with the past. It is, Theodore said. He reached over and squeezed her hand. Thank you for coming with me. Always, she said simply. Whatever you need, wherever you need to go, we are in this together. March arrived with warming temperatures and the first signs of spring. Josephine's time was approaching and Theodore grew increasingly nervous, constantly asking if she was all right, if she needed anything, if the baby was moving enough. I am fine, she assured him for the 100th time. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. But you are the only one I care about, he said, kissing her forehead. I cannot lose you. You will not, she promised. praying it was true. The pain started late one night in mid-March. Josephine woke Theodore with a hand on his shoulder and said calmly, "It is time." Theodore shot out of bed like he had been burned. "Now? Right now? Should I go get Catherine or the doctor or both? How long do we have?" "Theodore, breathe," Josephine said, trying not to laugh despite the growing discomfort. "It could be hours yet, but yes, go get Catherine. She said she would come when we sent word." Theodore rode through the darkness to Catherine's boarding house, and by dawn she had arrived with supplies and a calm, competent demeanor that immediately settled Theodore's nerves. "Out," Catherine told him firmly. "Go find something useful to do. I will call you when there is news." Labor was long and hard. Josephine understood now why women sometimes died in childbirth. The pain was overwhelming, relentless, and there were moments she thought she might not survive it. But Catherine was there, coaching her through contractions, offering water and encouragement, and Josephine clung to the knowledge that Theodore was just outside waiting for her. Finally, as the sun was setting on the longest day of Josephine's life, Catherine said, "One more push. You can do this. One more." Josephine pushed with everything she had left, and then there was a baby's cry, thin and strong, and Catherine was saying, "It is a boy. You have a son." Josephine fell back against the pillows, exhausted and elated, tears streaming down her face. Catherine cleaned the baby quickly and placed him on Josephine's chest. He was tiny and red and perfect with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Hello," Josephine whispered to him. "Hello, little one. I am your mama." Catherine opened the door and Theodore practically fell into the room. His eyes went immediately to Josephine, searching her face. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "We are fine. Come meet your son." Theodore approached the bed like he was walking on holy ground, his eyes wide with wonder as he looked at the baby. "He is so small," he breathed. "He will grow," Josephine said. "Do you want to hold him?" Theodore sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Josephine transferred the baby into his arms. Theodore looked down at his son with such pure love and joy that Josephine felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. "Hello, son," Theodore said softly. "I am your pa. I am going to take care of you and your mama for the rest of my life. That is a promise." They named him James, after Josephine's mother, whose maiden name had been James. Isaac came to visit a week later and admired the baby with appropriate solemnity before handing over a beautiful hand-carved rocking horse. "For when he is bigger," Isaac said, "every boy needs a horse, even if it is just a wooden one." The first months of parenthood were exhausting but wonderful. James was a good baby, healthy and alert, and both Theodore and Josephine fell completely in love with him. Theodore would sit for hours just holding his son, talking to him about the ranch and the cattle and all the things they would do together when James was older. That summer, with James sleeping in a basket nearby, they worked to expand the ranch. The herd had grown to 30 head. Theodore built a proper barn and improved the cabin, adding a second room so James could eventually have his own space. Josephine tended an expanded garden and put up preserves for the winter. It was a good life, simple but satisfying. In September, Theodore came back from town with news. "They are talking about making this area into a proper county, setting up better roads, maybe even a school eventually. More families are moving in all the time." "That would be good," Josephine said, bouncing James on her hip. "It will be nice for James to have other children to play with as he grows." That evening, sitting on the porch with James between them, beginning to drift off to sleep, Theodore said, "Are you happy, Josephine? Really happy?" She looked at him in surprise. "Oh, of course I am. Why would you ask?" "Because I think about what brought you here, what your father did, the way we started. I just want to make sure you do not regret any of it." Josephine reached over and took his hand. "I will not lie and say I'm glad my father sold me. That was wrong and it hurt. But everything that came after, us, our life together, James, I would not change any of that for the world. You gave me a fresh start. Theodore, a real one. A better one than anything I could have imagined." Theodore lifted her hand and kissed it. "You gave me one too. Before you, I was just going through the motions, waiting to escape. Now I have a reason for everything I do. You and James, you are my whole world." "And you are ours," Josephine said softly. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out one by one over the Colorado mountains, their sun sleeping peacefully between them, the ranch settling into night around them. It was a simple moment, but it was everything Josephine had never dared to dream of during those dark days when she first arrived in Westcliff and understood she had been sold. Her father had traded her for a fresh start out west. Theodore had given her a better fresh start, built on love and respect and genuine partnership, and that made all the difference. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Theodore proved to have a gift for managing cattle and the business side of ranching. Josephine proved to be resilient and adaptable, handling everything from birthing calves to doctoring sick animals to managing their small but growing household accounts. James grew into a sturdy, curious toddler who followed Theodore everywhere and had his father wrapped around his tiny finger. When he was 2, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier. Maybe because she knew what to expect, or maybe because she was stronger now, hardened by ranch life. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1881, an easy labor compared to James. They named her Clara, after Catherine, whose middle name was Clara and who had been there for both births, a faithful friend and adoptive aunt to their children. Isaac remained a constant in their lives, his claim never quite panning out, but his friendship solid and true. He was there for birthdays and holidays, always bringing small gifts he had made or found. He taught James to whittle when the boy was old enough and entertained Clara with silly songs. "Best uncle a kid could ask for," Theodore would say, and Isaac would flush with pleasure. When James was 5 and Clara was 3, Theodore and Josephine made the decision to build a proper house to replace the cabin they had been living in. It took 2 years of work, building in stages as they could afford it, but when it was finished, they had a real home. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor with windows that looked out over the valley. It was not fancy by city standards, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and paid for with their own work. Samuel Garrett died in 1884. Theodore went to the funeral alone, not wanting to subject Josephine and the children to his mother's potential coldness. When he came back, he told Josephine that his father had left him a small inheritance, a final peace offering. "He said in the will that he was proud of what I had built," Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion, "that he should have trusted me from the beginning." "He was right about that," Josephine said gently, "but at least he realized it in the end." They used the inheritance to buy more land, expanding their ranch to over 500 acres. The herd grew to over 100 head. They hired their first cow hand, a young man named Tom who was hard-working and loyal. The ranch that had started as a desperate dream was becoming a real, sustainable operation. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, Theodore took Josephine back to Westcliff for a rare overnight trip. They left the children with Isaac, who had moved his operation closer to their ranch and had built a small cabin on their property line. In town, Theodore bought Josephine a new dress. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, and he presented her with a delicate gold locket. "Open it," he urged. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of James and one of Clara. Josephine felt tears spring to her eyes. "It is beautiful. When did you have these made?" "Last time I was in town, I wanted you to have something special, something that showed our family." He took her hands across the table. 10 years ago, I did not want a wife. I did not think I was ready for marriage or family or any of it. But you changed everything, Josephine. You made me want all of it. You made me better." "We made each other better," Josephine corrected. "That is what good marriages do." That night in the hotel room, they made love with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of long partnership. Afterward, lying in Theodore's arms, Josephine thought about that terrified 18-year-old girl who had watched her father walk away, who had felt like her life was over. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, the happiness waiting just around the corner, would she believe it? Probably not, but that was all right. The journey had been necessary. The pain had made the joy sweeter. "What are you thinking about?" Theodore asked, running his fingers through her hair. "How lucky we are," Josephine said. "How far we have come." "The luckiest," Theodore agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And we are not done yet. We have so much more ahead of us." He was right. They had years ahead. Years of watching their children grow, of building their ranch into something substantial, of growing old together in the home they had created. There would be challenges, certainly. Ranch life was never easy, but they would face everything together, partners in the truest sense. The last baby came as a surprise in 1889 when Josephine thought she was finished with childbearing. Another boy, healthy and loud, with Theodore's green eyes and Josephine's determined chin. They named him William, and James and Clara adored their baby brother, fighting over who got to help take care of him. Isaac stood as godfather for William as he had for the others, and at the christening party at the ranch, he raised a glass to toast the family. "To Theodore and Josephine Garrett," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered friends and neighbors. "They started with nothing but determination and built something remarkable. Here is to many more years of prosperity and happiness." Everyone cheered and drank, and Josephine caught Theodore's eye across the room. He smiled at her, that slow, warm smile that still made her heart skip, and she smiled back. They had built something remarkable, not just the ranch, but their life together, their family, their partnership. That night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, they sat on the porch of their house, the one they had built together. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and cattle and home. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if things had been different?" Josephine asked. "If your father had not made that arrangement? If we had never met?" Theodore considered. "Sometimes. I think I would have eventually left his ranch, probably would have started my own place, but I would have been alone. Probably would have stayed alone. I was not the marrying type before you. What changed? You did. You showed me what partnership could look like, what it meant to have someone who chose to be by your side even when they did not have to. After that first year, you could have left. I told you I would help you, but you stayed." "Because I wanted to," Josephine said. "Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being something I was trapped in and started being something I chose. Every day I choose you, Theodore. Every day I choose this life." "And I choose you," Theodore said, pulling her close. "Every day, forever." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky, thinking about all the days that had brought them here, and all the days still to come. The ranch was quiet around them, their children sleeping safely inside, their cattle grazing peacefully in the pastures, their land stretching out in all directions. It was everything Josephine had never known she wanted, and more than she had ever dared to hope for. Her father had sold her for a fresh start out west, thinking only of himself and his own needs. But Theodore had given her a better, fresh start, one built on love and respect and genuine partnership. And Josephine had given him the same in return, building together a life that neither of them could have created alone. In the end, that was what mattered. Not how they started, but what they became together. Not the transaction that brought them to each other, but the choice to stay, to build, to love. They had taken something broken and made it beautiful. They had taken something forced and made it free. And they had done it together, two people who started as strangers and became partners, friends, lovers, parents, and soulmates. The Wild West was a hard land, unforgiving and dangerous, but it was also a land of second chances, of fresh starts, of the possibility that tomorrow could be better than today. For Josephine and Theodore Garrett, it had been all of that and more. Their love story had started in the most unlikely way, but it had become something real and lasting, a testament to the power of choice and commitment and the simple daily decision to build a life together. As the years continued to pass, their ranch became a landmark in the area. The Garrett spread, people called it, and it was known for good cattle, fair dealing, and the hospitality of the family who ran it. James grew into a tall young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's kindness. Clara became a beauty with a sharp mind and a gift for numbers that made her invaluable in managing the ranch books. William, the surprise baby, grew up confident and loved, never doubting his place in the family. Theodore's hair went silver at the temples and lines appeared around his eyes, marks of years spent squinting into the sun. Josephine's hands grew rough from work, but her smile remained as bright as ever. They grew old together as they had promised, building memories with every passing season. Isaac never married, content to be Uncle Isaac to the Garrett children, and eventually to their children as well. He sold his claim eventually and took up permanent residence in the small cabin on the Garrett property, becoming as much a part of the family as if he shared their blood. Catherine remained a faithful friend, visiting several times a year and always bringing news from town. She and Josephine would sit for hours over tea talking about everything and nothing. Two women who had found friendship in an unlikely place. Margaret Garrett lived to see her grandchildren softening considerably in her old age. She never quite apologized for her coldness during those early years, but she made efforts to be kind, to show interest in her son's family. Josephine accepted this gracefully, understanding that some people did best when they could pretend the past had never happened. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. James had married by then and brought his wife, a sweet girl from town named Lucy. Clara was courting a young rancher from the next valley. William, at 14, was already as tall as his father and showing signs of being a natural horseman. The party went late into the night with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. At one point, Theodore pulled Josephine onto the porch, away from the noise and celebration. 25 years, he said wonderingly. When I think about everything we have been through together, everything we have built, it seems impossible that it has only been 25 years. It feels like forever. The good kind of forever, Josephine said, leaning into his embrace. The kind where you cannot imagine any other life. Exactly. Theodore kissed the top of her head. I know I have said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing this life with me. Thank you for being my partner in everything. Thank you for making me want to stay, Josephine replied. Thank you for showing me what love should look like. Thank you for being the man I fell in love with and staying that man for 25 years. They stood together in the darkness, the sounds of their children and grandchild and friends celebrating inside. And Josephine thought about that first night in this house, in the hallway outside her bedroom, when Theodore had promised to treat her with respect and give her choices. He had kept that promise every day since, and she had chosen him, chosen this life, chosen to build something beautiful from broken beginnings. I love you, she said into the darkness. I love you so much it still surprises me sometimes. I love you too, Theodore said, more than words can express, more than I knew it was possible to love another person. They went back inside to their party, to their family, to the life they had built together through choice and commitment and love. And as Josephine looked around at the faces of her children and friends, at the home she and Theodore had created, at the legacy they were building, she felt nothing but gratitude. Her story had started in betrayal and pain, in being sold like property by the man who should have protected her. But it had transformed into something beautiful, a love story written across 25 years in the wild landscape of Colorado. Theodore had not rescued her exactly. Instead, they had rescued each other, two people who had not wanted this marriage, finding in it something better than either had imagined. That was the real fresh start, Josephine realized. Not the geography or the ranch or even the marriage itself. The real fresh start was the choice to love, to build, to commit to another person and a shared future. The real fresh start was waking up every morning and choosing partnership over isolation, love over resentment, hope over bitterness. Her father's betrayal had brought her west, but Theodore's love had given her a home. And in the end, that made all the difference. The party continued late into the night, with stories told and retold, with laughter echoing across the valley, with the warmth of family and community filling every corner of the house. And when everyone finally left, and the house was quiet again, Theodore and Josephine climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the same room they had shared for 23 years, and held each other close. "Here is to 25 more," Theodore whispered in the darkness. 25 more, Josephine agreed, knowing it was a promise they would keep, knowing their love was strong enough to weather whatever came next. They had started as strangers brought together by transaction. They had become partners, friends, lovers, parents, and soulmates. They had built a ranch, a family, and a life that honored both of them. And they had done it all by choosing each other every single day, no matter what challenges arose. That was their story. That was their legacy, and it was beautiful.